Well, hey, thanks for joining us. We're here to talk about getting results. We are all about enterprise performance management. It's not about HR performance, about an individual. It's about the performance of the organization. I have a very special guest here today, Jim Clark, who I've been a colleague of mine for 10 years. And Jim, could you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Chris and everyone. So, again, Jim Clark. I've been with Mass Ingenuity, worked with Chris for the last decade or so, with a wide variety of our public and private sector clients. And prior to that, I spent 20 years in the active outdoor industry in various leadership roles. Most recently as CEO of Yakima Products. Prior to that, I ran a kayak company, and previous to that, the Coleman Company. In each case, we implemented some form of enterprise performance management. So, topic near and dear to my heart, Chris.
Oh, well, that's great. So, as you said, in your roles, the performance of your organizations were basically, it was on your forehead. And so when you say, I've heard you say this, when you describe data as the currency of your management system, what do you mean by that?
So great question. One of my favorite topics, by the way. So in order to effectively manage performance, the first thing you need to do is clearly establish the required level of performance for any given process or outcome measures. Like, what are the performance ranges and targets necessary to achieve your goals for the organization? And then once you have that, then you need to understand what is the current level of performance of that particular process relative to your targets. And it's that information that provides the value of the performance management process, therefore the currency. Super valuable information.
Yeah, well, I get what you're saying about that. So, like, how does it work? And why should employees, leadership under you care?
Well, so let's talk a little bit about how do you make this currency work for you, right? And how do you get people really to lean in? The first thing you absolutely have when you have currency is the safe place to store it, right, Chris? You don't just leave it out on the driveway.
For sure.
You need a safe place to store your currency, where that currency can be managed, accessed, and in the case of data, analyzed. So you need a central bank, right? Secure but accessible. It's also important that you have both process and outcome measures in an enterprise performance management system so you can see the complete picture. That's also very important. And then next, you have to have clear ownership and accountability for all of the types of measures, the different currency. Because if it isn't owned by an individual, it does not have value in this analogy. But strong ownership is how the currency of measures hold their value. And then lastly, once you have this currency, you need a consistent routine to review the performance of each measure, identify where your constraints are, and take focused action. And when people's names are on measures, they care, right?
Yeah,
because
for sure.
there's a level of accountability that doesn't exist when their name is not attached to a measure. And so when you have a regular review process, that could be monthly, weekly, even daily, depending upon the type of measures, then on a regular basis, you review the measures and identify, are the improvement actions that you took actually moving it in the right direction? And that is the heartbeat of a management system. We've talked about that before, that have a plan, do, check, act is really what continues to build value in enterprise performance management.
Yeah. So I like what I hear, and I heard you mention something that I'd like to kind of go back and really understand. I heard you say the words outcome and process metrics. And I understand what that is. I often see what people might say, well, I have my KPIs. So what do you mean by that? And can you give an example of the difference between process and outcomes?
Absolutely. With performance management, it's easy to get wrapped around the axle with all these terms. And so when I communicate to our clients, I like to use a simple analogy. When we're watching sports on TV, what sports do you like? Football, Chris? You like football?
We're big basketball, Trailblazers in our household.
Fans? Okay, very good. I'm a football guy, but when we're watching TV, right, the announcers are constantly talking about process measures during the broadcast. So with football, they're talking about yards per catch and completion percentage and quarterback rating and first down conversions. So they're talking about those process measures, but right before they go to that Doritos commercial, right? Right before they,
Yeah.
they go to a commercial break, what do they talk about? The outcome, the score.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really that simple. The process measures tell us how we're doing along the way. Outcome measures tell us what is the result. Are we getting the result we want? So that's really the difference between the two. And so a good example, you asked for an example in business that most of us can relate to, would be in sales, right? So process measures in sales are very important. How many new contacts are being made? How many sales calls are we making per day? How many quotes are we sending out of proposals per week? What's our close ratio? All of those metrics tell us how are we doing within the sales process. But what's the outcome we want? Sales revenue,
Yeah.
right? It's simple. And so you can't really manage the outcome. What you manage day to day is the processes that lead to that outcome.
So, yeah, and I would imagine there's so many kind of pitfalls or mistakes. Can you kind of point out what you see where people kind of get stuck? You said they get, on the axle, right? Wrapped around the axle. What do you see on some of the common mistakes?
So we've seen a lot. I've made a lot, okay, over the years. And I would say the foremost common that I see with our clients, first of all, they have too many measures. They over a period of time, they've started measuring everything that they can measure. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're valuable. And so having too many measures is a common mistake with no kind of framework to understand, are they the right ones? Number two, I see too much focus on lagging indicators, outcomes, but not enough focus on the leading. And so oftentimes they're just reporting up the outcomes without really understanding the connection between the processes and how they relate to achieving the outcome. So that's mistake number two. The third one, and you and I have lived in this world, is measures are buried in Excel spreadsheets, right? We call it spreadsheet hell. They're buried in spreadsheets. They're complicated macro formulas and pivot tables, and there's usually one person in the organization that's an Excel genius that has it all figured out, but no one else knows the black magic in the spreadsheet. And they're not accessible or visible to folks, which relates to the last mistake I see folks make all the time, is failing to connect the people that actually do the work with the measures that they're accountable for. And when you don't have that connection, there's no accountability. Without that accountability, there's no value. So those are the four most common mistakes I see our clients make.
Yeah, and I often say when I work with my clients, right, like embrace it. Like you guys do great work. Like embrace understanding the work and tell your story and your journey of the great work you do. And doing it through data, win-win for the organization and for you as the employee. So as we help our employees, like how do you recommend they get started? How do they get started on this journey of building their currency?
Well, so if we measure the currency, Chris, it really starts with building a focused set of measures. And I said focused on purpose. It's not what can we measure, it's what must we measure to understand how we're performing. And so the very first place I like to start, because most teams and companies can get at this quickly. What are your highest priority outcomes in measurable terms? Is it sales? Is it profitability? Is it service level? Like what are the most important outcomes in measurable terms? Most clients can start there, right? And then, so once you have the outcomes, and then the simple question is, well, what processes must you do or perform at a high level to achieve those outcomes? You don't need to name every process in the organization. It's like, what are those critical, or what we call core processes that you have to perform well to achieve those outcomes? Most teams or organizations can answer that question. And once those handful of processes are identified, then you just ask yourself, what level of performance within our process measures, what level of performance is necessary to achieve the outcomes we want? And define that in measurable terms. And once you have kind of developed that set of measures, process and outcome, leading and lagging, right, then assign clear ownership. Who in the organization needs to own that measure on behalf, and sometimes it's on behalf of the team. And then once you've got that ownership, we talked about it earlier, you have to have a single location where everyone can access those measures and have visibility, because without visibility to your performance, there isn't that level of peer accountability that we talked about. When your name's on a measure, you care. And so
Yes.
it's all about getting that clear, getting it visible, and the more visible, the better. And it's that central bank we talked about. Where would we be without our central banks in the U.S. to distribute currency? So as you get right down to it, that is why, if you think back 5 years or so, why we developed result software, to get out of spreadsheet hell, to get in a situation where we had a central bank that was very efficient and very effective at storing and accessing our measures, because that's our currency. Chris, we think we lost your sound.
There we go. So sorry. Just really want to appreciate the time, Jim, that taking today. I have a few slides just to kind of recap some of our key points that we hit today. I love to show and share to our audience. So let me go ahead and show those slides. So basically, our first one is just recapping. It's all about outcomes and process measures. So understanding that, what are your goals, but then what are the activities? What are those process measures that you need to measure to make sure that you're on track? Then our next slide is really about those roles. We've talked about it, right? Assigning an owner. So who is your measure owner? Do you need a data steward, right? Those are the two key players each of your metrics should have. It's all about understanding and accountability. And then just to recap, kind of Jim's get started tips really is understanding those highest priority outcomes in measurable terms, understanding those processes, developing process measures, assigning owners, creating that simple central bank concept, a single accessible location. And then that essential review cycle. So kind of the lean terms of plan, do, check. So just a little bit about our software. Encourage you to learn more. It's our central bank and where we help our clients keep track of their data and their currency. Enjoyed the time today. I really appreciate you taking 10 minutes to hear our discussion about enterprise performance management. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Jim Clark. Our contact information is there. Hope to hear from you. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, Chris. Enjoyed it. Bye-bye.